Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to First Parish Unitarian Universalist in Medfield, and welcome to those of you who are streaming in from home. This congregation first gathered in 1651, and this historic meeting house where we worship was built in 1789 on the unceded ancestral lands of the Wampanoag. Welcome. Welcome to this place. Here we search for truth and understanding. Here we celebrate life and we contemplate its mysteries. Here we share healing and wholeness. So whoever you are, wherever you come from, whomever you love, we welcome you to this congregation.
As we gather together for worship this morning, being both near and far, we light our chalice, as we do each week. It is a symbol of our faith. May its light be a beacon of hope for the many, for those who feel lost, for those who feel threat, for those who feel tired, for those who are uncertain. May our beacon of hope help you find home, help you feel safe, give you respite, and honor your searching mind and spirit.
We are called to gather and worship as a beloved community. We are called to set aside distractions and anxiety, those things that might touch deeper springs, be renewed. We are called to seek to share comfort for the hurts that afflict. We are called to desire more love, more justice, in life more abundant. We are called to truth, to mercy, to humility, and to courage. Let us answer that call with yes. Come, let us worship together. Please rise in body or in spirit for our opening hymn, number 126 in your gray hymnal, Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing. Please be seated. Now I invite forward Jen Goodman to share with us the time for all ages.
Good morning, everyone. I was just about to invite the children to come up. Thank you for coming. I was thinking, how can I get them all to just come every time I do time for all ages? So if you feel like it. This is going to, and I'm glad you guys are here because I feel like maybe you can demonstrate for the grown-ups a little bit here. Oh, thank you. That's great. So, everybody, this is our theme for the month is finding our center. And what we're focusing on today is balance. And have you guys ever done anything with, I'm going to take my shoes off because we're going to do some movement. Have you ever done any balancing exercises or, you know, when you spin around in circles, like maybe when you're a littler and you fall or you roll down the hill and then you're all dizzy? Yeah. So I invite anyone who wants to stand up now. And we're just going to do a couple of things and really feel where our center is. And the first thing is just for those of you who've done yoga, just mountain pose, where you're standing straight. You feel like there's kind of an invisible string pulling the top of your head. You can let your shoulders drop and just breathe easily. And then gently rock back and forth from your heels to your toes. And you can just feel like your balance shifting, even in that subtle movement. Can you guys feel it? Can you feel where your center is when you do this? Like, is it, mine feels like it's like around here, sort of lower than I would think. And then what we're going to do is we're going to pick one foot up if you can. And you can either, if you guys are yogis, you can do like tree pose, or if you're dancers, you can do passe, or you can just like hold it up and just feel how your balance feels like that and feel if it Does it shift at all? Do you think it moves in your body, like your center? Does it move? Can you show them what they need to, like, you guys are my demonstrators. Yeah. That's great. Yeah. And then if you can maybe switch to the other foot if you're getting tired, and just put your arms up over your head and feel if your center shifts a little. Do you feel like it moves at all? Does it, like, for me, it's a very subtle movement up. Like, it only moves microscopically, right? But it's like tuning into that center in balance. And then the last thing we're going to try, you can put your foot down, is just gently swinging your leg, if you can do this. Turn sideways, gently swing it back and forth. And just feel your center, like where is your center as you try to balance, but you're also moving. I know kids are really good at this. Do you feel it? Because it sort of stays, like maybe it's a little lower to, Is it like moving? Where is it moving? Yeah, for those of you who can't hear without the mic, she's saying like she gets in balance and then she shakes and then she gets in balance, and there's like a rebalancing where maybe you're not exactly sure where your center is. Yeah. Yeah, it's like you have to, I don't know, like that moving around and shaking is useful, right? Yeah. So we're going to have fun today with balance things in RE. So you can go back to your seats now. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You all look pretty good doing that. Invite forward Duncan Glover to lead us in our candles of joy and sorrow.
Thank you, Rev Dave. Yes, my name is Duncan Glover. I'm a member of the pastoral care team, and now is the time in our service for those of you who wish to come up and give us a joy or a concern. Please, when you do so, tell us your name and light a candle and speak. How about you?
And for all those that we've lost recently or long ago, I will now light our candle of remembrance. All right, well, now is the time in the service for the children to head out to religious exploration. So as they go, let's sing them out. Quiet our hearts now as we enter into a time of prayer and meditation. Spirit of life, Spirit of love, the mystery that is too great to name, but somehow right next to us like an old friend. We ask for you to be with us now. On this late January morning, we ask for you to help us find our center. Some of us this morning standing firmly on 2 feet, solid, steady. Others are trying to take 1 foot off the ground, remain balanced, but keep falling over. We see you. We love you with all of who you are. Finding our center can be so challenging. That is why we're here today, to help regain a bit of our balance, to take this time together to breathe, to quiet our busy minds, we do this all together in community, in this beloved community. For that and more, we are so grateful. Let's pause now in a time of silent meditation. Off balance. Let's try that again. Amen. Well, now I invite forward David Temple to share with us the morning's reading.
This reading is called Healing the Heart of Democracy. It's by Parker Palmer. Citizenship is a way of being in the world, rooted in the knowledge that I'm a member of a vast community of human and non-human beings that I depend on for essentials I could never provide for myself. If American democracy fails, the ultimate cause will not be a foreign invasion, or the power of big money, or the greed and dishonesty of some elected officials, or a military coup, or the internal communist, socialist, fascist takeover that keeps some Americans awake at night. It will happen because we, you and I, become so fearful of each other, of our differences and of the future, that we are unravel the civic community on which democracy depends, losing our power to resist all that threatens it and calls it back in its highest form.
Thank you, David. This faith of ours, Unitarian Universalism, is a grand vision. It's a vision filled with peace and justice, of love and joy and compassion. It's a vision that embodies a few large congregations, many mid-sized congregations, and many, many small congregations like this one. But no matter its size, every congregation depends on its members, each one of you. By your commitment of time, energy, and resources, it helps to make this grand vision of ours real, makes it manifest here on earth. Individually and together, we are Unitarian Universalists, building a world filled with peace and justice, love and joy. Friends, the morning offering will now be given and gratefully received. I've been struggling to name what's eating at me these days, what's gnawing in the pit of my stomach, disturbing my sleep, lying beneath my confusion. It's not just the political turmoil that we're living with. It feels like something deeper, something I'm missing, even mourning. Yet without being able to fully put my finger on it, it's been painful enough, to be honest. I usually just push it out of my consciousness. But in those moments when I feel my spirits lifted and I cast about wondering, and in the time settled on what seems to be the absence, what am I missing? I settled on one word: we. We, the first person plural pronoun. It's a simple word. It's a powerful word. It's in a world where the first person singular I goes about distinguishing, separating, judging. The first person plural we, instead it wraps us all in a blanket. It tosses a lasso around us. It bunches us together, whether we like it or not. We, the people. This month here at First Parish, we have been talking about finding our center. But I wonder, how do we find our center when so much of the discourse in our country feels off-center? It's in conflict, operating from very different playbooks, unable to find common ground. We the people seems to have become we the people, except for those people. As a nation, this is a lot to deal with. There's been so many compounding issues lately. But friends, we've been here before. Back when this country was on the brink of civil war, Abraham Lincoln ended his first inaugural address with these words. He said, "We are not enemies, but friends. We must not be enemies. Though passion may have strained it, it must not break our bonds of affection." Lincoln knew that war was, of course, imminent, and that once the war was over, the North and the South would need to draw on the better angels of our nature. He was so concerned about our democracy surviving that he knew that was key. Looking at one another as a person worthy of love. It was only 5 weeks later that the first shots were fired at Fort Sumter. The Civil War had begun. 4 years later, the war ended when Lee surrendered to Grant at Appomattox. There had been 620,000 military casualties, and the civilian death toll estimated at 50,000 during those 4 years, right here on our soil. Abraham Lincoln, he was a man who could speak with great authority and compassion about the better angels of our nature, because this was something that he experienced deep within himself. Not only the better angels, but he knew the depths of darkness as well. He was a melancholy man. That's what they called it back then. He was a gloomy man. In the book Lincoln's Melancholy, Lincoln is described like this. For those who knew him well, he often conveyed the classic image of gloom. He would sit alone with his head bowed, his gangly arms bent at the elbows, his hands pressed against his face. He often wept in public and recited maudlin poetry. He told jokes and stories at odd times. He needed the laughs, he said. He needed them for his very survival. He said he saw the world as hard and grim, full of misery, made that way by fates and forces of God. His contemporary, William Hendon, said his melancholy dripped from him as he walked. Can you imagine someone like that in the White House today? And yet, in the mid-19th century, melancholy, it wasn't the stigma that it might be today, because those who were described as melancholy were thought to have an existential unrest. Someone with insight, with great sensitivity, someone who felt acutely the agony and the sweat of the human spirit. And so Abraham Lincoln, because of this melancholy nature of his, he knew that there was for every light a shadow. And that was within every person. And that was part of his being human. And therefore it was difficult to distinguish the good people from the bad people. Now, during his second inaugural address, delivered just a month before the end of the Civil War, Lincoln spoke of malice toward none and charity for all. He embodied what it meant to have a deep sense of love for all of those who had borne the brunt of this terrible war. The nation had never been so deeply divided. And so Lincoln pointed out that if this nation is to survive and thrive, quote, we must hold its divisions and contradictions with compassion, lest we lose our democracy. We must open our hearts to each other, no matter how deep our differences. You don't need me to tell you how deep the differences are in our nation right now. Differences that have only gotten deeper and louder over the past many years, and of course worsened during the pandemic, a time of enormous stress, isolation, death. But our nation has been through and survived some horrific things in our short history, the most horrific being the evil of slavery. And of course, the mass casualties of the Civil War, the war that split families and communities right down the middle. But it seems that as we've lost the illusion that we are one homogeneous white Christian nation, the voices of those who feel threatened by this corrective narrative change, many long for the good old days, voices filled with anger and hostility and hatred. And lately, it feels like some of those voices have become louder and more persistent. We the people, except for those people. When Lincoln was only 28 years old, he warned that the danger to our nation would not come from some military giant across the ocean, that all the great armies combined could never, quote, by force take a drink from the Ohio or make a track on the Blue Ridge. Instead, he said that if there is a danger that will destroy us, it must spring up amongst us. It cannot come from abroad. If destruction be our lot, he says, we must ourselves be its author and its finisher. It must spring up from among us. As we heard David Temple read the reading from Parker Palmer this morning, it says, if American democracy fails, the ultimate cause will not be a foreign invasion or the power of big money or the greed and dishonesty of some elected officials or a military coup or the international communist, socialist, fascist takeover that keeps some Americans awake at night. No, he says it will happen because we, you and I, become so fearful of one another, of our differences, of our future, that we unravel the civil community on which democracy depends. Sometimes I feel pretty cynical. It seems to me that sometimes we've already unraveled our civil society, that democracy might already be dead. You've heard pundits talk about the reality of the oligarchy under which we now live, that we the people has become a sham, that a powerful few are the ones controlling global markets. Those are the ones who are the real decision makers. That everything has become so big. And in the meantime, we, the little people, are scared to death. We're scared about our futures, and we're scared of one another, and therefore, the impulse is to batten down the hatches and take care of only me and mine. We see this. We know at some level, even within ourselves, although we may not want to acknowledge it, there's something wrong. Parker Palmer goes on to say, citizenship is a way of being in the world rooted in the knowledge that I am a member of a vast community of human and non-human beings that I depend on. I depend on for essentials that I could never provide for myself. And we keep hearing that the best government is no government. And yet we know that this is not true. Because so many of the essentials that we can't provide for ourselves are provided by the government. Things like the assurance that the food we eat is safe, that it's safe to travel the airways, that our roads are maintained and our children are educated. We're members of this vast community that we depend upon for the very essentials of our life. And so, how is it that we, the people, can do our part as citizens to protect this democracy of ours? How can we, the people, stand up to the oligarchies, those who would run roughshod over us? Where's our power? Do we have any? Or is it simply hopeless? Too late? And should we just retreat into our little cocoons, hide behind the walls that separate one another? Well, I hope you know that I'm not going to leave you in despair, feeling hopeless after hearing this sermon. You know, it was in seminary that I first learned the term voluntary association, a concept being taught by the UU theologian James Luther Adams. This concept of the voluntary association was first articulated by Alexis de Tocqueville, the French philosopher. Did I say that right, Bill? Okay, good. Always it's helpful to have a professor on hand. He traveled America in the 1830s and wrote about what he observed. He believed that for a society to prosper, the minds of its citizens must be brought together and held together by certain leading ideas. And so he was concerned about the American practice of individualism, in which citizens isolate themselves from society in general and instead retreat into a circle of family and friends, leaving society to take care of itself. He said that the more we lean towards individualism, the weaker the community becomes, which leaves us vulnerable to despots. However, as a counterpoint to individualism, he also observed that the way in which Americans form associations. He noted, Americans have not only commercial and manufacturing companies in which all take part, but associations of 1,000 other kinds: religious, moral, serious, feudal, general or restricted, enormous or diminutive. So the Americans made associations to give entertainments, to found seminaries, to build inns, to construct churches, to diffuse books, to send out missionaries. In this manner, they found hospitals, prisons, schools. If it is proposed to inculcate some truth or to foster some feeling of the encouragement of a great people, they form a society. And in the associations, feelings and opinions are recruited. The heart is enlarged, and the human mind is developed. De Tocqueville was struck by these voluntary associations because before the French Revolution, these were unknown in France. As he says, the upper class held all the cards when it came to shaping public opinion, mounting social action, and forming policy. The bourgeoisie kept tight control of the game. They held their cards very close to the chest. But in America, we saw citizens dealing themselves in and playing their own hands. And so as much as sometimes I get cynical and decry what's going on in our nation with the oligarchy assuming more and more power, in many ways, we average citizens are still playing our own hands. And so it was the volunteer association, as taught by James Luther Adams, that contributed to the strength of our American democracy. Of course, he was always pointing out that religious institutions are also voluntary associations, mainstays of a civil society, places where feelings and opinions can be acknowledged. where hearts are enlarged, where minds are developed. At least in our Unitarian Universalist churches, this is what hopefully happens. You know, an old story that some of you may have heard took place in 1948. It was a period of time in which most houses of worship were segregated. The church where James Luther Adams was a parishioner, the first Unitarian church in Chicago, was such a place. The minister at the time, the Reverend Leslie Pennington, believed that the time had arrived for them to take a stand against racism and to integrate their congregation. Well, James Luther Adams, who was a professor at Meadville Lombard Theological School and also a member of First Church's Board of Trustees, he agreed. So the two of them proposed a change to the church's bylaws, change that would desegregate the church. Now, most of those on the board, they supported the change, but there was one exception. This man claimed that they were trying to make desegregation into a creed, that they were asking everyone in the church to agree that inviting people of color to join their church was the best way to tackle racism. Well, the conversation, the debate really went on for hours until the early hours of the morning, till James Adams asked the man, well, what do you say is the purpose of this church? Well, the man who had so adamantly opposed the change to the bylaws, he thought for a moment and he said, all right, James, the purpose of this church is to get hold of people like me and change them. And so it was, and so it continues to be. Now, this congregation right here is a voluntary association. It's an organization to which you freely come and you are given the opportunity to freely join. This church, like so many other voluntary associations, are part of what keeps our democracy, our civil society alive and functioning. Because, you know, it's within associations like this that feelings and opinions are acknowledged, our hearts are enlarged, and minds can be developed. And yeah, sometimes even changed. You know, we know that this happens within spiritual communities as well. You know, a few years ago, I witnessed one member speak publicly that he used to take part in racist banterings on the job in Boston. And he doesn't do that anymore. I've changed, he said. And the thing that has changed me is this church. You know, I've heard stories from some of you that when First Parish Medfield began the process of confronting homophobia well over 20 years ago, there were some misperceptions about who they were. There were concerns voiced by some that we'd become known as the gay church if they came. Now look at us. You know, perhaps to some in the Medfield community, they think of us as the LGBTQ church, the gay church. That's a name we carry proudly. So many whose lives have been changed in big and in small ways by being part of this congregation. There's so many who have found here a haven, a sanctuary from that world where there's so much discord, so much discomfort, so much animosity toward the other, and those who keep us off center. This place can be a sanctuary from fear and hatred. So much of what is happening in our larger society. But you know, it's not only here where people find refuge, where feelings and opinions are acknowledged, where hearts are enlarged and minds developed. People come here to form partnerships and connection, to work in coalition with those who share their values, to worship together, to play together, to listen to one another, to love one another. As the late Texas journalist Miley Ivins once said, the thing about democracy, beloveds, is that it's not neat, it's not orderly or quiet. It requires a certain relish for confusion. Our nation has been quite divided of late. It's not nearly as divided as it was over the enslavement of those who maintained the economy of the southern states, while the North was quietly complicit. Slavery, the great evil, almost led to the dissolution of this nation. And yet, Lincoln was able to speak of malice toward none and charity for all. He embodied what it meant to have a deep sense of love for those who had borne the brunt of that unbelievably horrific and violent war. And he pointed out that if this nation is to survive and thrive, quote, we must hold its divisions and contradictions with compassion, lest we lose our democracy. We must open our hearts to each other, no matter how deep our differences. Friends, may we remember his words today when we too are beset by divisions among us. So may it be. Amen. Please rise in body or in spirit for our closing hymn, number 87 in your gray hymnal, Near My God to Thee, written by First Parish's own Lowell Mason. Friends, may we dare to live from the center of our being. May we make our own choices. May the fire that burns in our belly light our way. And may that personal commitment to our own individual lights make the world shine anew. So may it be. will now extinguish our chalice, but may its light and warmth stay in our hearts until we meet again. Here ends our worship. Let our service begin.